Let me tell you my story, a tale of love, loss, and the journey to rediscover what truly matters. As I sit here by this window, the soft rustle of leaves outside takes me back in time. You see, I wasn't always this old man with silver hair and trembling hands. Once, I was full of life, brimming with dreams, and surrounded by the love of my family. My earliest memories go back to a small village where I grew up. It was a place of simple joys and tight-knit communities. There was a clear river that ran through the fields, where children splashed and played on hot summer days. My parents were farmers, humble and hard-working. They taught me the value of perseverance and kindness, lessons that shaped my life in ways I'd come to appreciate later. My best friend John and I would spend countless hours exploring the woods and climbing trees. We were inseparable, dreaming of adventures far beyond the horizon of our little village. But life had its plans, and soon, those carefree days gave way to responsibilities. I left the village in my early 20s, moving to the city in search of work. That was where I met Sarah. She worked at a small bookstore, and her love for literature was as captivating as her smile. I still remember the first time I saw her, sitting behind the counter, absorbed in a novel. Her presence was magnetic. It took me weeks to summon the courage to talk to her. When I finally did, we bonded over our shared love of stories, and the rest, as they say, is history. Sarah and I built a life together that was as rich in love as it was in challenges. We faced everything hand in hand, from the struggles of starting a family with limited means to the joy of watching our children grow. Each of our 3 children brought their own unique light into our lives. Our eldest was thoughtful and responsible, our daughter was spirited and creative, and our youngest had a sense of humor that could brighten even the darkest days. Those were the golden years. Every morning, the smell of Sarah's cooking filled the house, mingling with the sound of the children's laughter. We'd gather around the dining table, sharing stories and dreams. Weekends were reserved for family outings to the park or the occasional fishing trip, which always ended with us laughing at some mishap or another. But life, as it often does, took an unexpected turn. Sarah's illness came like a shadow, creeping in slowly until it consumed her strength. Watching the love of my life fade away was the hardest thing I've ever endured. I took on the role of caregiver, doing everything I could to ease her pain and bring her moments of happiness. Her final words to me, "Take care of the children, Carter. They need you," became my guiding star in the years that followed. After Sarah's passing, the house felt empty despite the memories that lingered in every corner. I clung to the hope that my children would stay close, but as they grew older, their lives became busier. They had their own families, their own struggles, and while I understood, it didn't make the loneliness any easier. One day, they decided it was best for me to move into a care home. Though my heart ached, I agreed. I didn't want to be a burden. The Golden Years home became my new reality. It's a quiet place, filled with others like me, each carrying their own stories and sorrows. The nurses are kind, but their smiles can't replace the warmth of family. Most days, I sit by the window, watching the world outside while memories of Sarah and the children play in my mind like a bittersweet film. One day, a nurse suggested I write my memories in a notebook. At first, the idea seemed strange, but as I began to write, I found solace in the act. I poured my heart onto those pages, the laughter of my children, Sarah's gentle touch, the way our home used to feel alive. That notebook became my lifeline, a way to hold on to the love I feared was slipping away. Then came the boy. The son of a nurse, he was a curious and lively child who reminded me of my youngest son. He called me Grandpa and asked for stories. Sharing my childhood adventures with him brought me a joy I hadn't felt in years. His visits became a highlight of my days, a reminder that even in the twilight of life, connections can still be made. But my heart longed for my own family. I started writing letters to my children, each one a carefully crafted message of love and memories. I reminded them of the fishing trips, the bedtime stories, the times we danced in the living room while Sarah sang. I hoped my words would reach them, touch their hearts, and bring them back to me. The wait was excruciating. Days turned into weeks, and then finally, a letter arrived. It was from my eldest son. He apologized for his absence and promised to visit. That promise reignited a spark of hope within me. And then, one morning, he came. My son, my grandchildren, they were here, filling the empty spaces in my heart with their presence. Shortly after, my daughter visited too, bringing her own apologies and stories to share. Slowly, my family began to return. Their visits became more frequent, and the loneliness that had weighed on me for so long began to lift. The little boy who visited me at the home continued to bring me joy with his stories and drawings, and I realized that life is not measured by grand achievements but by the love and moments we share with those who matter most. Now, as I sit in the garden surrounded by my children and grandchildren, I feel a sense of peace I haven't known in years. Sarah's love and lessons live on in every smile, every hug, every shared memory. And though she's gone, her presence is felt in the warmth of our family's bond. This is my story. A story of love that endured loss, of hope that survived despair, and of the enduring power of family. Thank you for listening, and I hope it inspires you to hold your loved ones close and cherish every moment you have together. My name is Carter, though most people just call me Mr. Carter these days. But there was a time when I was simply a husband, a father, and a man doing his best to provide for the people he loved most in this world. Let me take you back to those days, to a home filled with laughter and the smell of Sarah's cooking. Our home was more than just walls and a roof. It was a sanctuary of love, where each corner held a memory. Sarah's cooking wasn't just about food, it was about togetherness. Every dish she made had a story, whether it was the apple pie she perfected after countless tries or the hearty stew she'd make on cold winter nights, filling the house with an aroma that made even the gloomiest days feel warm. Life in those early years was busy, chaotic even, but it was also full of joy. Our mornings were a flurry of activity. Sarah packing lunches while I wrestled with my tie, the kids arguing over whose turn it was to sit by the window on the school bus. Evenings were quieter, a time for stories and homework. I'd sit at the dining table, helping our eldest with his math problems, while Sarah and our daughter worked on her latest art project. Our youngest, always the mischievous one, would sneak under the table, giggling as he tried to tie our shoelaces together. Sarah had a way of bringing out the best in all of us. She saw potential where others saw flaws. When I doubted myself, she'd remind me of my strength. When the kids felt discouraged, she'd encourage them with her unwavering belief in their abilities. She was the heart of our family, the one who held us together even when life threw us its curveballs. And life did throw us challenges. My job demanded long hours, and there were times when I'd come home too tired to even speak. Sarah never complained. Instead, she'd greet me with a smile, a plate of food, and a gentle reminder to rest. "The children need you," she'd say, and I'd muster the energy to join them, whether it was for a bedtime story or a game of hide-and-seek. As the years passed, our roles shifted. The kids grew older, and their needs changed. Our eldest son became more independent, often retreating to his room with his books and dreams of college. Our daughter blossomed into a confident young woman, her artistic talents earning her recognition at school.
And our youngest?
He remained the joker of the family, always finding ways to make us laugh, even when things felt heavy. But with growth came distance. The kids' lives began to revolve around friends, school, and extracurricular activities. Family dinners became less frequent, replaced by quick meals on the go. Sarah and I often found ourselves alone at the table, reminiscing about the days when our children's laughter filled the room. "They'll come back," Sarah would say, her voice tinged with both hope and melancholy.
They love us.
They just need to find their own way first. Her faith in our family's bond never wavered, even as the gaps between visits grew wider.
Then came the illness.
It started subtly, a persistent fatigue, a cough that wouldn't go away. Sarah brushed it off at first, too busy caring for everyone else to focus on herself. But as her condition worsened, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. The diagnosis was devastating, a rare illness with no cure. I became her caregiver, a role I embraced with all the love I had. I learned to cook her favorite meals, though they never tasted quite like hers. I read to her from her favorite books, hoping the words would bring her some comfort. And when she was too weak to speak, I held her hand, silently willing her to feel my strength. Her final words to me were a testament to her selflessness. "Take care of the children, Carter. They need you." Even in her last moments, her thoughts were of our family, of the love she'd nurtured and the legacy she hoped would endure. After Sarah's passing, the house felt hollow. The laughter that once echoed through its halls was replaced by a deafening silence. I tried to fill the void by focusing on the children, but they were navigating their own grief. Our eldest threw himself into his studies, our daughter sought solace in her art, and our youngest, well, he coped in his own way, hiding his pain behind his jokes. As time went on, the children's visits became less frequent. They were building their own lives, chasing their own dreams. I understood, but it didn't make the loneliness any easier. And then, one day, they sat me down and told me it was time for me to move into a care home. The decision wasn't an easy one. Not for them, and certainly not for me. But I saw the guilt in their eyes, and I didn't want to burden them. So I agreed, even though it felt like the final chapter of a book I wasn't ready to finish. The Golden Years home became my new reality. It was a clean, quiet place, filled with people who, like me, carried stories of a life once full. The nurses were kind, but their smiles couldn't replace the warmth of family. Most days, I sat by the window, watching the world outside and replaying memories in my mind. Memories of Sarah, of the children, of a life that now felt like a distant dream. But even in the solitude, there were moments of light. One day, a nurse suggested I write my memories in a notebook. At first, the idea seemed strange. What good would writing do? But as I began to put pen to paper, I found a sense of solace. I wrote about Sarah's laughter, the kids' mischievous antics, the joy of our family outings. Each page became a testament to the love we had shared, a way to keep those memories alive.
Then there was the boy.
The son of a nurse, he was a curious, lively child who reminded me so much of my youngest son. He called me Grandpa and asked for stories. Sharing my childhood adventures with him brought a spark of joy I hadn't felt in years. His visits became a highlight of my days, a reminder that even in the twilight of life, connections could still be made.
Sarah, oh Sarah, my wife.
She was the light of my life, the glue that held everything together. We met in our 20s, in the bustling city where dreams were as big as the skyscrapers that surrounded us. From the moment I saw her smile, I knew she was the one. There was a kindness in her eyes, a warmth about her, like the sun breaking through on a cold, cloudy morning. Sarah had this unique ability to make everyone around her feel seen and valued, a trait that drew me to her and kept me grounded through life's many trials. We started our life together with little more than love and determination. She worked at a local library, and I was finding my footing in construction, a job that demanded long hours but offered the promise of stability. In those early years, we lived in a modest apartment, but it felt like a palace because it was ours. Every corner held a piece of our story, from the tiny kitchen where Sarah taught herself to bake to the living room where we spent hours dreaming about the future. When our first child was born, a boy we named James, everything changed. I still remember the way Sarah's face lit up when she held him for the first time. "He's perfect," she whispered, tears streaming down her face.
And he was.
James was curious from the start, always reaching for the world around him with wide-eyed wonder. He had a fascination for anything mechanical, toys, clocks, even household gadgets. As he grew, he would often sit with me as I worked on small repairs around the house, asking endless questions that made me smile with pride. 2 years later came Lily, our daughter. She had Sarah's eyes, a warm hazel that seemed to hold the light of the world, and a laugh that could brighten even the darkest days. From a young age, Lily showed an artistic flair. She loved colors, shapes, and creating things with her hands. I remember finding her one afternoon sitting in the middle of the living room, surrounded by scraps of paper, diligently working on what she called a masterpiece. Her creativity became a constant in our lives, decorating our walls with her drawings and filling our home with beauty. And then our youngest, Tom, completed our family. Tom was the joker, the one who could make us all laugh even when times were tough. He had an uncanny ability to bring humor into any situation, lightening the mood with his quick wit and infectious giggle. As a toddler, he'd often imitate Sarah or me, exaggerating our mannerisms to get a reaction from the rest of the family. His energy was boundless, and his mischievous grin became his signature. He loved pranks, but they were always harmless, like hiding my shoes or replacing Sarah's bookmarks with doodles he'd drawn. Each of our children brought something unique into our lives, weaving together a tapestry of joy and love that defined our home. Our home became a haven, filled with the chaos and joy that comes with raising 3 children. Sarah's cooking was the heart of it all. She'd spend hours in the kitchen, perfecting recipes and creating meals that brought us all together. She'd hum her favorite tunes as she worked, and the sound became a comfort to us all. Mealtimes were sacred. No matter how busy our days had been, we always gathered around the table to share stories, laugh, and connect. Those moments became the threads that wove our family closer together. As the children grew, so did the challenges. Balancing work and family wasn't easy, especially when unexpected expenses cropped up. I took on extra shifts, sometimes leaving the house before sunrise and returning long after the kids were asleep. Sarah never complained, even when I knew she was carrying more than her fair share of the load. Instead, she'd greet me at the door with a warm meal and a smile that reminded me why I worked so hard. "We're building something beautiful," she'd say.
And she was right.
Every sacrifice we made was for them, James, Lily, and Tom. There were times, of course, when the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. I remember one particularly hard year when the company I worked for faced layoffs, a threat that hung over us like a storm cloud. Every day at work felt like walking a tightrope, not knowing if I'd still have a job by the end of the week. At night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, calculating how long our savings might last or what we could sell if it came to that. Sarah was my anchor during that time, always finding ways to lift my spirits even when I couldn't hide my anxiety. She'd sit with me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, listening patiently as I vented my fears. "We'll figure it out," she'd say, her voice steady with conviction, as though her sheer belief alone could alter our circumstances. And in many ways, it did. Sarah had a remarkable ability to see solutions where I saw only problems. She started small, cutting back on expenses without making it feel like a sacrifice, turning our humble dinners into creative feasts, sewing up worn clothes to give them new life, and even encouraging me to take on small repair jobs for neighbors in my spare time. Her optimism was infectious. One evening, when I came home particularly dejected, she greeted me with a surprise: a handwritten list of every skill I had, from carpentry to fixing appliances. "Look at this," she said, holding up the paper.
"These are your tools, Carter.
"You're not just a worker, you're a builder. You can create opportunities if they don't come to you." Her words lit a fire in me. Over the next few months, I began taking on more odd jobs, finding fulfillment not only in the extra income but also in the sense of agency it gave me. And we did figure it out. Together, we always found a way forward, not by waiting for luck but by crafting it with our own hands. That year taught me something invaluable. Resilience isn't about never falling, it's about knowing you can rise again, especially when you have someone like Sarah by your side. Life wasn't just about the struggles, though. There were countless moments of pure joy that became the cornerstones of our family's story. Family picnics at the park were one of our favorite traditions. I still remember how the kids would burst out of the car, running toward the grassy fields with their kites and frisbees in hand. Sarah and I would spread out a blanket under a shady tree, unpacking the picnic basket she'd carefully prepared. Sandwiches, fruit, cookies, and lemonade were our staples, but it wasn't about the food, it was about the time spent together. I'd watch James teach Lily how to throw the frisbee, and Tom would inevitably try to climb the tallest tree, his laughter ringing through the air. Those afternoons felt timeless, as if the world paused just for us. Lazy Sunday mornings were another cherished ritual. Sarah would wake up early to mix the pancake batter, and soon the kitchen would be filled with the aroma of butter and syrup. Each of us had our roles. James would measure out the ingredients, Lily would stir the batter, and Tom, always the entertainer, would create pancake art in the shape of animals or silly faces. I'd man the stove, flipping the pancakes while pretending to be a chef on a cooking show, much to the kids' amusement. By the time we sat down to eat, the table was a mess, but our hearts were full. Vacations, though rare, were some of the most memorable moments of all. We didn't have much, so our trips were simple but filled with adventure. We'd cram into the car, the trunk overflowing with suitcases, blankets, and snacks. Sarah would pack sandwiches and juice boxes, and I'd map out a route that took us through the countryside. The drive itself was half the fun. We'd play I Spy, sing along to old songs on the radio, and make up stories about the places we passed. One trip in particular stands out, a visit to a small lakeside cabin. The kids spent their days swimming, fishing, and building sandcastles, while Sarah and I sat on the porch, sipping coffee and watching the sunset. Evenings were spent around a campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories under a sky full of stars. Those trips weren't extravagant, but they were filled with love and laughter, and that made them priceless. Even the simplest moments became precious memories. I think of winter evenings by the fireplace, where we'd huddle together with mugs of hot cocoa. Sarah would knit scarves for the kids while I read aloud from their favorite books. The kids would listen intently, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight. And then there were the rainy days, when we'd turn the living room into a fort made of blankets and pillows. Tom would lead adventures through the fort, pretending to be a pirate or an explorer. The sound of rain tapping against the windows only added to the coziness of those afternoons. These moments, big and small, are etched into my heart, as vivid as if they happened yesterday. They remind me that life's true wealth isn't measured in possessions but in the time we share with the people we love. And even now, as I look back, those memories fill me with a warmth that carries me through the quiet days. But time, as it always does, marched on. The children grew older and began to carve out lives of their own. James excelled in academics and dreamed of becoming an engineer. Lily, ever the artist, spent hours sketching and painting, filling our home with her creations. And Tom, well, Tom remained the life of the party, charming everyone he met with his humor and charisma. As proud as I was of their independence, it was hard not to feel the sting of their absence. Family dinners became less frequent, replaced by quick conversations in passing. I'd often find Sarah sitting at the table, a wistful look in her eyes. "They'll come back," she'd say with a soft smile.
They love us.
"They just need to find their own way first." Her faith in our family's bond never wavered, even as the house grew quieter with each passing year. Then came the day that changed everything.
Sarah fell ill.
At first, it seemed like nothing serious, a persistent cough, a bit of fatigue.
But as the weeks turned into months, her condition worsened.
Doctors' visits confirmed our worst fears. She was battling an illness that would eventually take her from us. I remember the night she told me. We sat in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows on the walls. "Carter," she said, her voice trembling, "we need to prepare the kids." In the months that followed, I did everything I could to care for her. I learned to cook her favorite meals, even though they never tasted as good as hers. I read to her, choosing books she loved, hoping they'd bring her comfort. And when she was too weak to talk, I held her hand, silently praying for more time. Sarah faced her illness with grace and courage, never once letting it diminish her spirit. Her final words to me, "Take care of the children, Carter. They need you," have stayed with me, a guiding light in the darkest of times.
Our home was a haven.
Sarah would cook the most delicious meals, and the children's laughter would echo through the walls. I worked long hours, sometimes too long, but it was all for them. I wanted to give them the life I never had, new clothes, toys, and education. Sarah, ever patient and kind, would tell me not to overwork myself, but I couldn't help it. They were my everything. As the years went by, the children grew older. They went to school, made friends, and started to spend less time at home. I understood it, it was natural. But Sarah, she would always say, "Don't worry, Carter.
They'll come back. They love us." And I believed her. How could I not?
She had a way of making everything seem okay. But then, life threw us a curveball.
Sarah fell ill.
At first, it was just small things, a bit of tiredness, a cough that wouldn't go away.
But it got worse.
She became so weak that she couldn't get out of bed. I took care of her the best I could. I cooked, cleaned, and sat by her side, telling her stories to make her smile.
But she was fading.
One night, she looked at me with those kind eyes and said, "Take care of the children, Carter. They need you." That was the last thing she said to me before she closed her eyes forever. My heart shattered into pieces. I didn't know how to go on without her. The house that was once filled with life became eerily quiet. I thought the children might stay close to fill the void, but they had their own lives to live. They visited less and less. And one day they sat me down and said, "Dad, you can't stay alone. It's better for you to live in a home for old people." I wanted to protest, to say no. But what could I do? I saw the guilt in their eyes, and I didn't want to be a burden. So I nodded and went with them to the Golden Years home. It's a clean place, quiet, filled with people like me, old, lonely, waiting. The nurses are kind, but they're busy. Most days, I just sit by the window, watching the trees sway in the wind, lost in my thoughts. I think about Sarah a lot. About the life we had, the love we shared, and the dreams we built together. I wonder if I did enough to honor her memory, if I cherished her as deeply as I should have while she was here. Did I fail as a father by being too focused on work? Did I lose precious moments with my children because I was too busy providing for them instead of being present? These questions haunt me, creeping into my thoughts in the quiet hours of the morning. Sometimes I try to reason with myself, remembering the sacrifices I made for my family, the hours spent toiling to ensure they had everything they needed. But then, in the silence of my room, I'm left with only memories and a gnawing sense of regret. A regret that I couldn't be everything to everyone. And yet, through it all, the love Sarah and I shared remains my compass, a reminder that even in imperfection, there was always love. One day, a nurse handed me a notebook and said, "Write your memories. It might help." At first, I didn't know what to write. My hands shook as I held the pen. But then, the words started to flow. I wrote about Sarah, her laughter, her soft voice. I wrote about my children, their first steps, their bright smiles. The notebook became my companion, my way of talking to someone, even if it was just paper. One afternoon, a young boy came to visit. He was the son of one of the nurses, a lively child with curious eyes that seemed to sparkle with boundless energy. He smiled at me and said, "Hi, Grandpa." That smile, it reminded me of my youngest son when he was little, full of mischief and joy. The boy didn't hesitate to sit beside me, his legs swinging off the edge of the chair. He tilted his head and asked, "Do you have any stories? What was it like when you were my age?" I nodded and began to tell him about my childhood. About the village where I grew up, nestled between rolling hills and vast green fields that seemed to stretch forever. I painted a picture of mornings spent fishing by the clear, glistening river and afternoons chasing butterflies through the wildflowers that grew along its banks. I told him about my best friend, John, and how we climbed trees that seemed to touch the sky, our laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves. There were summer evenings when the whole village gathered around a bonfire, sharing stories and songs, the stars above us brighter than I'd ever seen since. The boy listened with wide eyes, his face lighting up as if he could see the world I described. For a moment, I felt alive again, as though those carefree days had returned. Sharing my memories with him wasn't just a conversation, it was like opening a window to my soul, letting the sunlight of my past illuminate the present. After he left, I felt a strange mix of joy and sadness. Talking to him was like catching a glimpse of sunlight on a cloudy day, brief and beautiful, yet it only made me long for more. It was wonderful to share those stories, but it brought a flood of thoughts about my own family. Do my grandchildren even know about me? Have they ever wondered about the life I've lived, or the stories I hold in my heart? Do they know how much I miss them, how often I dream of holding them close and telling them the tales of their parents when they were young? The ache of that longing settled deep, a bittersweet reminder of what I had lost and what I still hoped to regain. One evening, I asked a nurse if I could call my eldest son. She handed me the phone, her smile encouraging yet empathetic. With shaking hands, I dialed his number, each ring echoing the pounding of my heart. Finally, he answered. "Hello, Dad," he said, his voice distant and tinged with hesitation. The sound of his voice brought a wave of emotions I struggled to contain. I told him I missed him and that I wanted to see him, each word carrying the weight of my longing. "I'll try to visit soon," he replied, but his words, though polite, felt hollow, a promise wrapped in guilt rather than intention. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind filled with thoughts of Sarah. She would have known what to say, how to heal the rift that had grown between us. She had a gift for weaving us together, for reminding us of the strength and love that made us a family. Without her, it felt as though the threads were unraveling, and I was powerless to stop it. The next day, I decided to write letters to my children. In the first letter, I reminded my eldest son of our fishing trips. In the second, I told my daughter how proud I was of her and how I used to call her sunshine. In the third, I wrote to my youngest son about the laughter he brought into our lives. I gave the letters to the nurse to mail, hoping they would read them and remember me. Days turned into weeks, and there was no response. But one morning, a nurse handed me an envelope. It was from my eldest son. My hands trembled as I opened it. He apologized for not visiting sooner and promised to come with his children. My heart soared with hope. And then, one bright morning, he came. My son, standing tall but looking hesitant, walked into my room with two children holding his hands. My heart raced as I took in the sight of him, the lines of worry on his face, the familiar curve of his smile that he must have inherited from Sarah.
For a moment, I couldn't speak.
"Dad," he said softly, his voice filled with a mix of guilt and warmth, "I'm here." My chest tightened, a swell of emotions overtaking me, relief, joy, and an ache I hadn't let myself fully feel until that moment. The tears came before I could stop them, and as he stepped closer, I opened my arms, the years of distance melting away in an instant. I opened my arms, and he hugged me tightly, as if trying to bridge the years of distance and silence. His children, my grandchildren, stood close by, clutching colorful drawings they had carefully made for me. Their shy smiles grew wider as they stepped forward, offering their creations with an innocence that brought tears streaming down my face. I admired each drawing, one of a house with a garden, another of a smiling family, and felt my heart swell with a love I hadn't known in so long. For the first time in years, I felt whole again, as though a missing piece of me had been returned. We spent hours together, reminiscing about old times, sharing stories, and laughing as if no time had passed. Their presence filled the room with a warmth that melted the years of loneliness away. Shortly after, my daughter visited too. She apologized for staying away and promised to come more often. Slowly but surely, my family began to return to me. The young boy who visited me continued to bring me joy with his drawings and stories. And as the days turned into months, I realized something important. Life is not about how much you give, but about the moments you share with those you love. Now, as I sit in the garden with my children and grandchildren by my side, I feel at peace. The gentle breeze rustles through the flowers, carrying the faint scent of roses, Sarah's favorite. The laughter of my grandchildren echoes around me as they chase each other across the lawn, their voices a symphony of joy that fills the quiet corners of my heart. I watch my eldest son, now a man with a family of his own, lean against the garden gate, chatting with his sister as she cradles her youngest child. Tom, ever the joker, is entertaining the kids with exaggerated tales of his latest adventures. In this moment, surrounded by laughter and love, I know Sarah would be proud. Her love taught me to keep going, even in the darkest times. She'd remind me that family is a garden that needs tending, watered with time, nourished with kindness, and protected with care. And now, as I look at my family, I know that love, true love, never fades. It grows, even in our absence, blooming in ways we could never have imagined. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you to hold your loved ones close and to never take a moment for granted. If you enjoyed this story and found it meaningful, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with others who might benefit from its message. Together, let's build a community that cherishes family and uses storytelling to enhance our vocabulary and learn English more professionally. See you in the next video.